welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I am the Woodland Witch. Today's video was highly requested and it is going to be all about deity work. My personal journey through deity work, how to start beginning your journey into deity work, some things to remember, some misconceptions, and overall just how to get started. I did have an introduction to deity work on my channel when I first started, and it was all about my work with Apollo and getting your journey started. I've since deleted that video because at that time I felt like my mindset and my concept of deity work was very fear-based, and I felt like the video that I had was also fear-mongering and making other people afraid to be open to this sort of a path. So I took it down. A lot of my views and my personal experiences have changed the way that I view deity work. At the time, I was working with Apollo. Apollo was there from very early on in my practice. We no longer work together at this time, and I'll talk about that shift a little bit later. As of now, I specifically work with the Irish gods and goddesses. That is mostly because of my ancestry and just where my path has led me at this time. Now, getting started into deity work, it's important to know that you don't have to work with the deity. When you're a practicing witch, there is no requirement that you work with any gods or goddesses or believe in anything of the sort. A lot of times people do feel called to follow that path, and that's completely okay. I will say one of the misconceptions for me in the beginning was that you had to be practicing for like X amount of time before you could work with a god or goddess. And now there are precautions and things that you want to be wary of and aware of when getting into that sort of a thing. But I just felt like that was very fear-mongering. And when Apollo started becoming present in my life at the time, it made me very terrified. And I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with it. Another misconception that I had in the beginning of my deity work journey was that you couldn't reach out to a god or goddess to work with them. You couldn't petition them. They had to reach out to you. I don't believe that now. While I do believe that deities show up and are present at certain aspects and points of our life, I don't believe that we aren't allowed to approach them. You are allowed to petition a deity. You are allowed to reach out to them, ask them to work with you. They all have different attributes and different strengths. If it's something that you're wanting to work on in your personal life and you feel connected to a specific deity, you can very much petition them. And that brings me to venerating and worshiping versus working with. You can worship and venerate any deity that you want to, provided you're being culturally respectful. Please do not go worshiping a deity or interjecting yourself into a culture that does not belong to you. When it comes to worshiping, you are just honoring them. You may not be actively working together, but it may be a deity that you highly respect and you highly resonate with, that you want to worship and honor in your practice. When petitioning to work with a deity, there's a little bit more that goes into it, and you're not going to petition every deity in the same way. Now, with that being said, deities don't have to say yes to your petition. They may not want to work with you, or they may not feel it's the right time. But that doesn't mean you still can't worship and venerate them if you choose. Like I said before, I very much stay within my specific ancestry and heritage when it comes to deity work. It wasn't always like that. I didn't really know anything about myself or about my path, really. But as I said, there was a time when I did work with Apollo. I had an amazing healing journey in my work with Apollo. Energy was very gentle and very uplifting, and he helped me remember my worth. Once I started studying my ancestry and connecting more with my lineage and my heritage, that's when things started to kind of take a shift. I remember I was newly pregnant, and it was right around Imbolc, and I experienced the energy of Brigid and Cernunnos. Now at the time, I very much thought they were present to try and work with me. At that time, they were not. It was very much the time of year I was experiencing their energy at that specific time of year when we honor both of them. And while they weren't there to work with me at the time, they very much led me to a pantheon that follows my lineage and my heritage and where my family comes from. You're going to find a little bit of difference between historical worship and modern worship, obviously because we are not in a historical time. The way that we worship is going to vary and it's going to be a little bit different. But with that being said, it's important to know the historical context of your deity, know their lore, their stories, their personality. Certain deities want certain things, others don't. Some of them want to be worshipped in a specific way, some don't. Some want candles, some don't. It's not going to be the same. So it's very important to study your specific deity that you're working with, get to know anything and everything you can about them, books, research, websites, anything. And keep that historical context as much as you possibly can. Because it is a modern practice, it is going to be different. You're going to have a little bit of differences when it comes to historical worship, and that's okay. Your relationship with your deity is incredibly personal. It's not going to be the same as your work with another deity or with someone else's work with the deity that you're working with. Don't compare. You see a lot of deity worship and venerating on the internet. This is where I struggled a little bit because I was very new to deity work. I would see these personifications of these deities on the internet and I was like, this is not my relationship with them. It really caused me to doubt myself in my relationship with them. Just deity work in general, I really was questioning it. I was like, am I crazy? Am I not picking up on the right things? Am I not experiencing what I'm supposed to be experiencing? And that really led me to just stop sharing my deity work, which is why I've been putting off this video for some time. It's really just my personal journey with them. So I tend to keep it as private as possible. That helped my relationship with them immensely. So remember that comparing yourself to other people and their relationship with their deity is never going to help. It is a very personal relationship to you and them. Only you know what it is you and them are working on. Get to know the signs that they share with you and how they show up for you. They also have different aspects. For instance, on Medigna, who I work with now, has 3 different aspects. They all show up for me differently. So if you are working with a deity that has different aspects, get to know those aspects, who they are personally, when they're showing up together, when they're separate, when you're getting specific signs from each one. Very much keep the blinders on when it comes to deity work. I don't talk about it as much as I used to. And that's just because it helps me stay grounded and keep my practice personal with them. I've gotten a lot of questions regarding deity work and being low energy or taking breaks in your practice. You can very much take breaks. I grew up in a very Christian household. I was very fearful of the God that we believed in because that's what was taught to me. It was taught that you can't make mistakes, you can't do XYZ, or your good things are not going to happen to you. One thing I very much had to work on when it came to deity work is separating my Christian worship and my Christian mindset from my worship and my belief in other pantheons. It's not the same. So taking breaks and needing to rest and having low energy is completely valid and completely normal. Healing that religious trauma really helped me continue my relationship with my deities in a more uplifting and positive manner. That was also something I really worked on with Apollo. And if any of you have worked with Apollo, his energy is very warm and light and goofy, and just very rarely was he like that upset. At least in my experience. As I said, it's different for everyone. Your relationship is different, but in my experience, my relationship with him, he was very rarely upset. Stern, yes, sometimes. I remember beating myself up so hard because I was like, oh, I didn't do a reading with Apollo today. I didn't light his candle. And then eventually I was like, Sarah, you have to chill out. I'm allowed to be human. You're allowed to be human. And that is something that has very much shifted in my deity worship practice now versus back then. When I worked with Apollo, it was very much about healing and restoring my confidence, restoring my self-worth, forgiving myself, being gracious with myself. I would say it was a very good deity to work with first. When I got pregnant, I very much started experiencing Brigid. And Brigid is a goddess of fertility, the hearth, of smithcraft, of poetry, and she aids in midwifery. Now, at the time, Brigid was not around to work with me. Her energy was just very present. It was in bulk. It was that time of year. So this brings me to the venerating and the worship. While I was not actively working with Brigid at the time, I was praying to her. I was asking for her assistance. I was terrified to be pregnant. My pregnancy was not a very great experience, and my birth was even worse. So I very much called on her in those times to be with me and to aid me in this transition. Medigna also came in during my pregnancy. This was where the major shift happened in my practice. I had been working with Apollo, and I had the most vivid experience with Medigna, like the most undoubted experience that I've ever had with any deity. And it was a dream. I had a dream of her, and I was walking into this, it looked like a cathedral almost, but it was small, and it was like an entryway, almost like a foyer to a cemetery. But there was a roof, and there was 2 pillars on each side, and there were books on each side, and there was like candles lit. It was like reddish, black, everything, like very dim lighting. And I walked into this little cathedral entryway to this cemetery, and I looked to my right, and there was a book, and on the book it said the Phantom Queen. And it had all of the names for Anmarigna and just different stories, and I was like reading them in my dream, and I look up and I look out the other side of this like foyer, and I just see 3 hooded figures just standing, and then they just morphed into one being. It's like kind of giving me chills thinking about it now because it's like such a vivid memory. And I woke up, and at the time my husband was not home. He was training for another job, and so I was home Mondays through Fridays by myself, and I was like so pregnant, and I was like, am I having like a fever dream or a pregnancy dream? Like, am I crazy? Because as I said, like that was the most vivid experience I've ever had with a deity. And I look over, and I had left a candle lit on my altar at the time, and I was like, oh, I left the candle lit, and I went and I got out of bed, and it goes whoop, and it blew out, and I was like, okay. So me being me, I needed more proof, and so I said, okay, Anmarigna, if this is really you, if you are really trying to work with me, give me some sort of insight, like tell me. So my friend and I like to trade readings off on each other very often, specifically just to remove that bias. We trade readings with each other all the time if one of us doesn't have time or whatever. So she's doing the reading, and she says, someone is trying to get your attention, like screaming at you. And I was like, who? She's like, I keep seeing the Morrígan. And I was like, excuse me? So that was terrifying for me, because going from Apollo, who's very much more soft-spoken, to this like very apparent like, ma'am, I'm trying to reach you. We're trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. It was just insane. It was just a really overwhelming experience. I still work with Anmarigna now, and my work with her is very empowering. It's all about self-confidence and standing my ground, setting boundaries, being assertive, trusting myself, trusting my intuition, trusting in what I think and what I know and what I believe. Just being unapologetically myself. And as I said, it's been so empowering. And after I had my baby is when Brigid really showed up, aiding me in being a mother and taking care of my home. Other things that I'm going to keep a little more private. My work with her is very, very personal. I don't want to share very much of that relationship with her because, like I said, it is so personal. And after Anmarigna started becoming way more present in my life, I felt Apollo drawing back, and I didn't really understand it. But at this time, as I said, I was getting really into my ancestry and my heritage and my family and their beliefs and their practices. And I remember grabbing my tarot deck and I said, Apollo, what is going on? I don't feel you. I need to know what's happening. Is something shifting? Am I supposed to like move on now? And as you know, Apollo is a sun god. I got the sun, and I got the tower, and I got the 8 of Cups. And I said, okay, it is time to walk away from this. It's time to fully transition into my lineage and my ancestry and this part of who I am. It was very emotional. It was very hard to walk away from that. And that's something I don't think people talk about enough either, is that like when a deity leaves, you know what I mean? You look at this relationship that you've created, and sometimes it's hard to think about them not being there. And like I said, it's not to say you can't still worship them, but that work sometimes does come to an end. And it's very emotional in good ways and bad. It's sad, it's exciting because you have come to this new stage, you've grown, you've learned, but that doesn't make it any less hard. Deity work is very personal, and your journey is not going to look the same as another. You don't have to share it. You don't have to participate in deity work at all if you don't want to. I personally like to keep most of this private, and that is just because it is my personal relationship with them. This journey is personal to you. You are going to experience more things and learn more knowledge as you go. But I hope that this gave you a little bit of guidance and insight on moving forward in your personal journey with deity work. I hope that you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.